All right. Hi, Andrea. How are you today? It's good to chat.
Hey, Natalie, how are you? It's good to see you.
Good. Yes, good to see you too. I'm really excited to chat with you. I think one of my first podcast episodes, if not the first one, was with Katie Neal and the executive coach and comm strategist, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, you have to meet Andrea because she's always talking about AI and is really involved with PRSA and all these things." So, and I was already familiar with you through LinkedIn, but it was very much a confirmation of like, okay, we need to have a conversation. So, I'm glad we can talk.
I know Katie's such a great connector. I'm so glad she tagged me on that post. I was like, yes, because like
Yes.
sometimes you're just like, I don't like those forced, like, hey, you're looking for an organic way to connect with people. So this made total sense.
Totally, totally. So I would love to hear just about what your career has looked like up until this point, and I definitely want to talk about your interest in AI for comms, and you're clearly doing a lot of thought leadership work on LinkedIn around that, which I think is so good for the comms community, and then your work with PRSA. But yeah, tell me a little bit about your career so far.
Yeah, so I was born in Uruguay. For those that don't know, it's south of Brazil, east of Argentina. And I came to the US. I did PR and journalism, and I graduated, did an internship at Golan in Chicago, where I worked with some big brands, Corona Extra, Wells Fargo, that kind of thing. And it was an amazing agency experience. And then I did work with nonprofits on the health space. Then I moved around throughout all this time. Like I lived in 5 different states. Yeah. And I've been to half of the country, like traveling wise. So I've seen a good portion of the US, which has been really enlightening because it kind of ignited that like interest in multicultural communications and marketing as well. So I moved to Kentucky, which is where I am now. I moved to Kentucky to work with the University of Kentucky. I did global communications there and marketing. And then I got recruited by an agency in Atlanta to do work with government. So I worked with federal, state, and local clients, some big names like the VA and the Secret Service, the Capitol Police. And I did both marketing and PR. And that's where probably like 2021, I think it was like early 2021, that I started to like a friend showed me Jasper. This was before OpenAI came out. And I saw it, and obviously it was super rudimentary, right? Like it's been 5 years, but it kind of made me realize, like, whoa, this is going to change not only the industry, but it's going to change the world.
Hmm.
And it was kind of a moment of holding my breath, like, I'm a planner and I'm a strategist. So my head went into like a million different case scenarios of like amazing to horrible. And so I was like, yeah, I need to find ways to make sure that our industry is not get left behind and that people don't get left behind. Because the big companies may have access to all these things, but like the small business, medium-sized businesses, the ones that, don't have that kind of access, that's what kind of moved me to start my business. I founded Shift Makers Consulting, and it's been 2 years that I've been working independently, but a year officially of like funding, like incorporating the business. And it's been a wild ride of like just diving in AI and reading every day. I know one of the podcasts you mentioned, like you feel like there's the FOMO, right? Like you're like, oh, I'm missing, like there's not enough time to read, and I totally share that feeling. But at the same time, I realize that the stuff that we're doing is years ahead of a lot of people, right? And
Hmm.
so I'm now spending time and kind of trying to help people in communications, a lot with like the PRSA, the Public Relations Society of America. That's where I serve on the national board of directors. I've been involved with the organization for 15 years in various leadership roles. A lot of work around diversity, equity, and inclusion, but now more on the strategy and leadership space. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell. I've had a chance to touch on over 15 industries in the a little over a decade that I have an experience. So I would say it's a pretty packed decade plus of work, and excited to see what's next.
Yeah, that's awesome. I always say that's the beauty of comms is that we get to touch so many different industries. I think, and the skills in so many ways are transferable across industries. And I think that's something that makes us special. So yeah, I love that. Sounds like you've packed a lot in. What does your work look like now with shift makers? You said you help folks kind of understand how to use AI and how to benefit from it. But what does that look like? Are you working with comms teams? Are you working with comms leaders? What to say more about that?
Yeah, so the majority of the time I've spent because of the agency, right? Like I ended up kind of moving into a leadership role in the agency. So I worked with all these different IT, events, marketing, PR, creative. So I've kind of really understood well and also on the project management side of things. So I understand a lot of that inner workings of the marketing and comms teams. So that's primarily where I have focused on. But I will say, I had a call a couple weeks ago that was talking to the finance team. So it was a little different, right? But primarily is, yeah, I'm focused mainly on like marketing, comms, and the operational side of things, but within that context.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I just posted today on LinkedIn about how comms is so much more than just the words and how it's really an organizational wide effort, right? And you have to have all the teams bought in and it's about like the experience for your audience and not just kind of the words that you're throwing at them. And I think that's another superpower of comms pros is our ability to work across functions, and connect the dots. I see a lot of people call themselves like dot connectors who work in comms, and I that always really resonates with me.
Yeah, to me, I was thinking about that. I was like, am I a connector? Do I think myself a connector?
Yeah.
I think myself as an integrator, like a bridge
Mm,
builder and integrator. So like I
mm.
bring the comm side of things, but I also the genes run deep. Parents are engineers. I've always kind of had that kind of mentality of systems and ops. So I would say like I'm an integrator, but you're right. Like the communicators are in it's part of business strategy. And if it's not, then one, you're probably making mistakes that you could avoid and you're missing out on opportunities. So it's so critical that comms comes at the C-suite level, right? That it's the right hand of leadership of the CEOs and COOs of the world.
Yeah, and I saw you post something about how AI isn't going to fix your broken systems, it's going to kind of show the weaknesses that already exist there, and I think that that's so kind of, that really illustrates, I think, the work that you do, right, around operations and building systems and how important that is, and I think that's so true, and I think oftentimes comms professionals don't have time to set up the best systems, right? At least that's been my experience, and it ends up kind of, being a problem later on, when things, like, really get hectic and chaotic and the right systems aren't necessarily in place, so I really liked that, post. What kind of inspired that for you?
I read some usually what I post is a reaction to something I read, right?
Yeah.
And I think about it and then I'm like, well, maybe this is worth sharing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I think when I think about just what I do, like I align business strategy with systems and storytelling. Like that to me is the way that I think organizations can flow and work well. And AI comes into play to help optimize those things. But if you don't have your protocols, if you don't have your standard ways of doing things and spell those out, I think that's where you start to see AI accelerate more crashing than really building anything. And it probably comes from, it comes from this like kind of dual brain that I have, right? Of like systems engineering type thing. But it also comes from like experiences that I've had where I had to like be in a role and was given not even holding, I'm not asking for holding hand, but I've given no guidance at all. And I was like, I don't ever want anyone to feel this way. So I built like systems and things in place and then the documentation to leave behind, right? And that's kind of how I started to do that. One of the clients that I'm working with, also with like integrating not just AI, but technology in general. So like, for example, Asana, right? So I have a certification in Asana and like, it's not just, oh, I'm building these workflows. It's, I'm actually building the document. So if I won the lottery next month, like you're not going to be like, hey, Andrea, why are we doing this way? Right. It has to
Mhm.
be readable. It has to be repeatable. And it also helps with new employees and it kind of it kind of shows you, I feel like, the disconnect a lot of times when, like, for example, when it's a big company and you have an intern and the intern wants to learn, but they don't really have a lot of like guidance, right? I think when you document those processes and those things, like that helps the employees be set up for success. And that's the same thing for like having a well machine just organizationally, right? It's giving visibility to how things are done in the company.
Yeah, and I find that in a lot of cases, certainly in my own experience, like the processes aren't documented until someone leaves a position and they need to like leave their notes, right? And it's like that is kind of backwards, right?
Yep. Yep. And they're probably, good amount of people, like they're checked out.
Mhm. Right.
Or if they're not, they may not remember everything, right? So like to me, yeah, like build even myself, like I have contractors and stuff, but like I work by myself. I still have documents of like how I built certain GPTs or how I built certain workflows because it just even from a continuity, business continuity standpoint and risk standpoint, like what if the tool goes down? What if you need to be able to rely on other things to know, go back and see how you did things and optimize them too, right? So
Mhm. Yes, I think that's a great practice to document things even just as a solopreneur because I hear that a lot. You know, people are like, you need to document and create SOPs so that when you are ready to hire a virtual assistant or an ops manager, you can actually hand over something. And to your point, like it's already fresh. You've spent the time to really flush out the document and you're not just like trying to recall from 3 months ago how you did something, you know? So, yeah.
yeah, the VA, you mentioned the VA. I've heard people be very frustrated, like, well, they don't get this. I'm like, well, did you explain that to them?
Right.
Because you can't translate your brain, right, by osmosis. So documentation helps in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. So what do you think the opportunities are around AI for comms professionals? And then we can talk about the challenges and pitfalls too, but I'm curious in comms, like what is the potential there around AI?
I think the potential is to become more strategic because a lot of the time we spent time doing things that are like grind work, right? And that's when AI can relieve that pressure. The claim of like, yeah, free up your time, like have more flexibility. In reality, I feel like people are just like, you can do more. Okay, let's do more, right? So that's the caveat there. But I think is allowing everyone to be more strategic with what they do. And if you are using it to make drafts or close to final drafts, that you have the time to look at it and say, is this the best way of telling the story versus, okay, I'm just going to write something out or publish something and then I'm done, next thing, right? So I think ideally it would give us a time to pause and to apply more higher order thinking skills, but it requires an effort and intention to do that, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's how I think about it too. I feel that, I see a lot of comms professionals and it's happened to me get really bogged down by the kind of mundane, repetitive tasks that can be automated in a lot of in a lot of instances like approval processes and those kinds of things. And I really do think that AI can, it can allow us and free us up to do more of that strategic work that we love. I just think comms professionals are a very creative people and, we should be able to do more of that work. And I think we're best used and best kind of leveraged as professionals when we are focused more on that work.
It allows you to spend more time getting to know the people and the audiences that you're trying to reach, right?
Yes.
If I have 4 hours now released in a given week because I automated certain things, then I can spend time understanding my clients or my prospect audience or doing research, focus groups, like that kind of stuff that makes us be better at what we do. So, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and even using it as a thought partner, to your point, to kind of identify gaps or to be more strategic, to say, okay, help me flesh out this idea or, help me identify some, possible risks of this message, for this specific audience and this geography or whatever it may be. And yeah, I think there's a lot there. And I often see the conversations around, it can make us more productive and more efficient, but that conversation just isn't as interesting to me, because I think the goal shouldn't be like more, more, more. It should be better, right? And more doesn't mean better, right?
Well, and it's the shift from, I think, historically, for better or for worse, like communicators have been seen as these like output machines, right? Like produce content, produce this, like, and it's all about the outputs, how many stories you did, how many people you contacted. And it's not really about that. I think with AI, if you apply it properly, you can shift more. If you're not already thinking outcomes, that you can get easier to that lane and think about outcomes and the impact that you have and measure stuff. I know like traditionally the industry, this is one of kind of my pet peeves. When people say like comms people are not numbers people, I'm like, we are, because we should be, right? Like being able to prove your impact and measure things. And I think when you're freeing up some time so you can focus on that, that's critical. That maybe before you thought you couldn't, in my mind, you still should, but that you thought you couldn't afford that time to measure because it takes time. Well, like you have tools now to free up your time so you can actually prove your value.
Totally, totally. You mentioned kind of this, the business outcomes proving our impact and that you connect business strategy with systems and storytelling. How do you think about ways that comms individuals and teams can prove our value and prove our impact and measure some of those outcomes? Like how do you even approach that question?
I mean, it depends on the goal of the client, right? But to me, I was trying to think about this like before our call, like, is there anything I can think of that is not measurable? It may
Mm,
take time, it may take resources, but
yep,
I think you can measure everything.
yep.
You can measure the quality of a conversation. You can measure whether people are more happy or engaged or less stressed because you adopted AI, right? I think everything is measurable. So it really is like what are your business goals, and then what are the tools, the people, the processes that we have in place that make measurement happen, and if not, what do you need to modify so that you can measure, right? Ideally, you start fresh from like having concrete, what I say, smart goals, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time bound. But even if you don't, like, how can we retroactively figure out ways to measure, right, the impact that you have in the business? It could look like awareness, it could look like reputation, it could look like change of behavior. You could post 100 different posts on social media, but if you're not actually moving the needle in the behavior that you're looking to do, then you're just a content machine.
Hmm.
The question is, whatever depends on what kind of business you are, like how do you measure that behavior, right? And the more tools that are developed now with AI, I think that's an easier way to get there, right? Before it probably was super manual in that sense, and now there's like other avenues to do that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's a great reminder that there are ways to measure everything and just how important that is, for an individual who's ready for a change in roles and needs to be able to, talk about their impact in a very kind of facts and figures kind of way, in a numbers way to your point, right? And then for teams to be able to advocate, we could use an extra person and here's why and here's kind of why it makes sense for you to invest in our team because we've made this impact. So yeah, I think that's great that's something you think a lot about.
And in a lot of ways for companies, it could be like cost, cost per output versus manual output cost, right? Like a lot of it, I feel like businesses, we are in a capitalist society, so they're going to focus on the cost, right? But I think it's important to remember the human impact of it too, right? Of AI adoption, and are people happier? Do people stay longer? Do people champion your company and put the shirt on of the company and proudly represent because they trust that you're gonna equip them to do great work and not kick them out to the curb the moment that you figure out it's cheaper to have an AI bot do it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I used to say, AI won't replace your job. Someone who uses AI
Mhm.
will. And I just don't really feel comfortable saying it quite like that anymore because of what we've seen with Duolingo and, lots of companies that have announced, like, pretty frank terms, no, we are going to use AI to replace people, right?
And they're saying it now because I feel like they're against the wall, the sword, like
Yes.
they were doing it silently before. They
Yes.
just now are having to come clean.
Yes.
I mean, I had a conversation with someone else. It's like, well, I'm not letting go people. And I said, well, but are you hiring the same amount of people that you were? No.
Hmm.
So it is changing, right? I think it would be naive to think that way. I'm not an optimist. I'm not a pessimist. I'm a realist.
Hmm.
And at least now companies are coming clean with what they're doing. I think it helps people really understand kind of the seriousness of learning about AI and staying current.
Yeah. So from your realist perspective, what keeps you up at night? Like what really worries you about how our profession is changing?
I think you mentioned it in one of the conversations you had, and I've brought this up before, and I think is typically in any industry, but particularly in marketing communications, you start with internships. You start like getting your feet wet with all these different opportunities, and then you build on those, right? And you move up the ladder, the corporate ladder, um, and that's how you get experience. That's how you get promotions. That's how you get access to bigger accounts and that kind of thing. And if you have those big producers like agencies have historically been, right? Like the big companies are hiring less interns, they are or less entry level positions because I can do that with AI in 5 minutes versus explaining that to someone in 30 minutes or 2 hours every week. Like that is cutting an entire generation of future professionals. So that may not be felt now, but in like 30 years' time, 20 years' time, potentially even less, you're not going to have that person that has developed that gut feeling that can do comms or marketing, even if the Wi Fi's out, right? Like, or
Yes.
ChatGPT goes down or whatever. And so I think to me, that's the biggest risk. It's like, how can we as a society shepherd and steward these younger minds and to get the proverbial gray hairs? Because I think it's one thing for us to use AI because we know what excellence looks like. We know what feels right and what doesn't. And when you're just entering the field, you're getting a feel for that. You don't know that yet. And it's a time to make mistakes. It's a time to have someone to mentor you. So I think it's very important to continue to mentor and to sponsor younger generations, because just because they're younger doesn't mean that they know how to use AI, they know the implications, they know the consequences and the risks. So yeah, I would say like that's probably what keeps me up at night. It's just that the younger generation being kind of cut off, and just the disparity. I think the disparity is going to grow in a lot of different areas, but in terms of skill set, like those who don't use AI and those who do, and like there's going to be a big difference, and those people are going to be out of jobs. They won't have the skills, and it's going to be all feel like almost impossible to upskill at that point. We're still in time, right? To like, and I think that's important. Is like, even though we feel like things are changing drastically, and like in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, like broadly population, like we still don't have robots running around and doing our work yet. In some places there are, but
Hmm.
so this is a time to get together, get your stuff together, figure out how you're gonna do it, and learn.
Yeah. I talk to a lot of comms executives about how they can best use AI and use it to benefit their work. And, sometimes some of the kind of the folks who haven't quite adopted it at all yet, they worry about, what if it gives me back, just utter trash? Like, what if I give an LLM, some kind of simple prompt and it gives me back something so bad? And I'm like, well, you're an expert. You're going to know, you're going to be able to identify right away, like, that's trash, or I can use that part, but I can't use that part. Fine, let's keep going. Let's iterate. But to your point, if you're early in your career, you haven't had the experience to be able to identify what is and is not quality comms work, right? And what messages will resonate with this, target audience, and what won't. So I think that's a really good point. Yeah, I think a lot about the pipeline and kind of the comms and PR and marketing workforce. Senior positions will certainly evolve as well through all of this. And so I think you know, it's not like people who are entering the workforce now will need the exact same skill set, will need to build the same skill set to be able to like run a PR firm in 25 years, right? As the current executives. But there is a basic level of like PR 101 that needs to be taught and understood in order to get to that executive point, right? And so I'm curious how this kind of challenge intersects with your work with PRSA, because from my understanding with PRSA, a lot of it is about mentorship and bringing up the next generation and that kind of thing. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, so I mean, part of my whole life, basically here in the US, one of the things that has been critical to my growth and my success has been the network of PRSA and the people that I've met there. I would not be here today as a US citizen if it wasn't for people that mentored me and guided me. So that to me, like I have an eternal gratitude toward PRSA and the members. And that's why I've continued to serve and give back, but also to mentor others. I've mentored over 75 students in like the past 3, 4 years. Just that I started, counting. I've helped shepherd a few national leaders, and that's important to me because I was one of them. I was one of them where I didn't see anyone like me in leadership roles, and I know that that's important. On the other, in addition to that, on the mentorship side, PRSA, one of the things that differentiates, I would say, like our members and just in general, is a PRSA code of ethics. And every member, when you're signing up your membership, renewing your membership, you are reading the code, you're agreeing that you're going to abide to the code, right? It's not that it's not punishable offense, but it is important for our members to say that they abide by the code of ethics, that they value honesty and transparency and fairness, and that's critical with AI. So right now, for example, I'm with a working group where we're revising the AI guidelines. Actually, I have a call after this where we're revising the guidelines for ethical and responsible use of AI for communicate for the industry. So those are some of the ways that I'm kind of I think I'm contributing, right? In that way, because yeah, I'm using the tools on a daily basis, so I have a sense, and I work with the Board of Ethics and Professional Standards to guide communicators, because sometimes sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? And you need to be able to know what questions to ask a vendor so that you can decide whether they align with what you do or not. What questions to ask a client as well, right? To make sure, or a prospective employer, to know where they stand and if they're going to do the right thing. I think that's, to us, that's as an organization, that's very important. And it's important that people are not afraid of AI, right? So like, how do you apply the code of ethics to this new context? And one of the beautiful things of the code of ethics is timeless. So like you can put it against a lot of different things and it still tests true. So it's really thinking about what feels right, what encourages free flow of information, transparency, and doing right not only by the clients but also by the public at large. I think that's the critical piece, because we need communicators who can apply their critical thinking skills, who can identify misinformation, prevent misinformation, right? Stop it. Be the one that speaks in the rooms and says, no, this is not right. And being able to articulate those things, which proudly, like I've been that person sometimes. And sometimes you're like, am I gonna get laid off? Am I gonna lose this client because I'm saying it this way? But here, I have to. You have to tell your clients that you're using AI. And the approach that I take, which I'm guessing at some point you're probably gonna, everyone knows that I use it. So that's easy for me. Like I don't come later, I'm like, oh, I use it for, no, I use AI. If you don't want to use AI, then let's not work together. We're not a good fit. But transparency is key, I would say. So PRSA can play a big role in kind of helping you see those cases and guide you in how you respond to different scenarios. That was a very long-winded answer, but
Oh, that was beautiful. I think knowing what you value is more important now than ever. In terms of like, what is your red line for what are you and are you not comfortable using AI for? What models are you comfortable using based on the data they've been trained on? I mean, these questions will continue to come up, and I think that moment of like taking many moments of reflection around what you value is going to be so, so important. I'm curious too how how your work around diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of ties into all of this. And it sounds like you're really interested in making the comms and PR and marketing professions more inclusive spaces. And it sounds like you benefited personally from inclusive spaces yourself. And I'm curious kind of how you think about that.
Yeah, so I was born in Uruguay, so I came as an immigrant. I'm
Yeah.
white, but I'm Hispanic.
Yeah.
Most people don't think about it until I open my mouth. But I also am part of a lot of other communities, right? And I think people don't necessarily see that. Like make assumptions based on how I look, right? And it shapes that lens. And I've learned living in all these different places that I've lived that there's a lot of work to do in educating people and building more empathetic and inclusive leaders. I've learned from people who have done amazing work and that are trailblazers in the industry. And I learned from people who have done the complete opposite. And so I've been on both ends. And I think what's moved me is to make sure that everything that I do, like you don't get an Andrea outside of work and an Andrea in work. Like I am always talking about DEI. My friends know like that there is no one who like thinks Andrea and does not associate those, that acronym that is so convoluted right now.
Yep. Yep.
But
Yep.
but it's part of who I am. It's shaped my experience, and my identities have shifted. The importance of those identities have shifted over time too, right? And so helping people see that that's okay, helping people see like, hey, there's someone like you that is listening, that will pick up on cues that maybe someone drops because they're not sure if you're aware or friendly with LGBTQ community, and you're like, I know that path. So
Yep.
I know what you're talking about. This is
Yep.
a safe space.
Yep.
And PRSA has really allowed me to kind of hone that leadership. And when I served in the National DEI Committee, to give back and inspire others, but also to learn from Anita Ford Sanders, who's like an incredible mentor and friend of mine, and other people that really have shown me like it's you standing your power, right? And that's where you're gonna do great things, is when you stand in your power and you believe in yourself. And I just hope that I inspire others to do that.
Yeah, that's so cool. And the representation is so important. I talked to someone recently and she was like, I can't believe that some of the comms events I attend, it's a panel of all white men and they're talking to a room that's like 80% women, right? And all kinds of other identities as well. But like, it's like, why aren't there any women on the panel, right? And I just think the representation is so important, and people being able to see themselves and like having a place in this profession. There's so many amazing women communications professionals, women of color in this profession. Then we look at leadership and PR and comms, and there's not the same representation there. And so it's clear that there are these challenges in the profession. And I think you're doing really good work to help address some of that, because it's it is a discrepancy.
It is, and thank you for that. I think the discrepancy, yes, systems have enabled that, right? Allow that to happen. But I will also say that there's a piece that, not a huge piece, but a piece that falls with each of us, to not allow those systems that have told us certain stories to believe those stories. And I think individually, everyone, white men or not, you have to unlearn what you've learned before. And I think that's been like particularly an interesting experience for me, because I wasn't born in this country. I didn't grow up with a culture. So like even when I first came, I didn't understand the issues of racism, because Uruguay is primarily white. There's a very small population of Black people. There's more indigenous communities, right? And as I lived through these different places in the country, I was like, whoa, like the learning that has been passed on from generations and generations. It's huge. Just like I've learned things about the US, right, before coming that may or may not be true. Like there's a lot of unlearning and awareness that we need to build for ourselves so that we can advocate and be confident about what we bring to the table, the value that we have, and to leave that table if that table is not welcoming us or understanding the value that we bring.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I say it a lot. I think the two questions we have to ask are, it's what do we value, like I mentioned before, and what value do we bring? I just think those are the two most important questions that comms people can ask themselves right now, because it's yeah, you have to know where you stand, and you have to know what you bring to the table, because the work won't speak for itself, right? And you have to be able to advocate for your own work and also for others, and help give a voice to people who may not have a seat at the table. So I think
may
that's
not have the
great.
confidence either, right?
Yes.
Like people that I've mentored some of the students that they knew their stuff. They just needed someone to say, I believe in you. I know you're doing it. I know you're awesome. Just move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. What are you excited about with communications right now? AI related or not? And I don't know, where do you see things kind of headed? So like, I'll give you an example how I think about this. I'm super interested in the creator economy right now. And I think partly because I feel like I have kind of one foot in that world, right? And so, I'm always thinking about like, okay, how are creators and influencers impacting the role of PR and marketing? And how does a brand think about how it sells its products to its audience now that we have creators and influencers on the scene? And what does that mean for PR and marketing strategies? So that's kind of something that I think about a lot. But what do you think about in terms of kind of what's next or what excites you?
To me, I mean, it is related. I do agree with what you're saying about kind of one of the things that just always excited me, and why I probably picked this field, is that it's always changing. And I'm a lifelong learner. I get bored easily. The fact that there's like always an opportunity to learn, to expand your mindset, to get to know people in a different way, to get to know the different communities, I think that's always to me, and I probably will always be exciting to me. But from an AI standpoint, and I think about access and I think about possibilities and the impact, and just like I mentioned, like it can increase the disparities. I think done well, like it could help us solve diseases, about big issues, right? But it's not gonna be one person. It's gonna take organized operations for it, right? But uh, bigger things like safety, hunger, access to education, access to healthcare, like that to me is what I hope and I dream about, that the technology will evolve to a point where we can have more of that, and kind of mitigate that job loss, that all those negative things that could come with it too. There's a lot that you can, I think, before, if you wanted to become an expert, or expert is like what, 10,000 hours, right? If you
Sure.
like study, right? Like let's go with that.
Yep.
Like you could, right now the technology allows you, not just AI, but just tech in general, allows you to have access to people and knowledge in a way that we've never had before. And that's exciting. If I wake up tomorrow and I'm like, I want to learn, I don't know, fixing cars, even though I probably won't. I can spend time and hours, right, to learn that. And I don't necessarily have to go to a university to do that. I'm not saying that the universities is not important. It provides you a vital, critical, structured experience that I think is very important. And it works for some people. But I think that's the possibilities of like, well, you have a blank slate. Where do you want to go? It's exciting. It's also could be terrifying and anxiety inducing for some people, right? Like you're like, I'm used to having those guardrails. But I think it teaches you a lot about resilience, about creativity. You mentioned creativity and agency, not in the agency like term, but like independent thinking and taking decisions and moving wherever you want to go.
And there's also this aspect of allowing ourselves to be open to exploration and play. Like I think a lot about that with AI and large language models. And that's what I'm always encouraging people to do, is like, just play with it, right? You don't have to take a structured course, and have someone walk you through it. But like, here are the components of a great prompt. apply this to your specific workflows and your specific kind of tasks and see what it comes up with. And if you're not impressed, then ask it some more questions and ask it what it needs to know from you in order to give you a better response. And like, that's how I discovered, that's kind of how I reached that moment that you described at the top, as far as, wow, this is going to have a huge impact on our profession and the world, is because I just sat on my couch and played a lot with ChatGPT, and I really pushed it and tested it. And I think that should not be underestimated, just the pressure-free play attitude towards some of these tools.
Yeah, to ignite your curiosity, right?
Mm-hmm.
For some, I'm someone who's been always curious. I always ask questions. I always want to know more. And I feel like now it's like, I have any question, I'm talking with someone, we're wondering, oh, did that happen? I'm looking it up. I already have the answer, right? Like, and before you'd be like, oh yeah, maybe I'll look it up later. But I think the curiosity, yes, I was smiling when you were talking about your this about just like creativity and playing with it, because I was doing one of the webinars that I did with PRSA about AI. Was it last month? Yeah, last month. And when I was preparing for it, I was looking for, like, I was doing a poll where I was asking, like, are you drinking from the fire hose, or are you like a kitty under a blanket?
Mm.
And I couldn't find the right photo in like stock photography of like what I wanted, because I wouldn't like something like, like exaggerated. And so I went to first to ChatGPT, and I generated an image. And I was like, okay, this works. And then when I was done with the presentation, I was like, but what would this look like if I was the one drinking from the fire hose?
Oh my God, yes.
And so I tried that, and I was like, okay, now what would this look like if it was a video? So I went to Sora and I animated it. And I was like, in 5 minutes, I suddenly had like a pretty, like a commercial of me drinking water from a fire hose, which was hilarious. I didn't use it, but it was an example of like, I'm curious about this. What does that look like? And suddenly I was fine tuning my prompting and learning a little more about video, which is a whole other space that's going to explode. But yeah, like satisfying that curiosity and fueling it. I think has been amazing with this.
Yeah, I was talking to a woman who works at an agency and is super interested in AI, and I was asking her, we were talking about AI and education, which that's like a whole other can of worms, right? But I was asking her, like, as someone really passionate about this, how are you talking to your kids about AI and making sure that they're prepared? Because we were just talking about how currently education as it stands now is not preparing kids for this era of AI, right? And it's going to take time to get there. And so she said, I'm teaching them how to prompt large language models and be very specific in their instructions. And that skill is applicable to so many other areas of life, right? Like being able to clearly give your thoughts and say, this is what I want, and here are the parameters, and here's what I don't want. And like and I just thought that was really great, because I was like, that is something that is that's just a skill that child will use in all kinds of things, right?
Yeah, I mean, what they're growing is their communication skills.
Exactly. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you have someone who's not as strong in that area, they can use AI to learn more and to push that. Yeah, I mean, kids definitely. I listened to Paul Reutzer and Marketing AI Institute, the podcast, and he talks about his children too, like teaching them what is right and what is wrong. I think the key point there is like it goes back to the ethics and to the values and what's right and what's not right and what's acceptable and what you shouldn't do with AI, right? Because if you use it to teach your children, like they also are going to incorporate that through life. So like, don't be rude. Don't you may be direct.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Yeah, it's teaching you how to be a better communicator, to articulate your ideas and your wants much better.
Yeah, and I think that's why I believe comms professionals are so well suited to use large language models specifically really well, right? And to really excel at it, because we're used to crafting our words and overthinking every single sentence and how it could be interpreted every which way. And it's like we're so practiced and skilled at that already. So there's such an opportunity for us.
Yeah, there's opportunity for us like at individual level, but also from a societal level. We can be the vehicle that helps people get on board the right way and the right pace and the way that makes sense for them. I think that the role of the communicator is going to become more critical than ever.
Yeah, totally. This has been a great conversation, Andrea, and thanks for all the work you're doing for the comms community. I think it's really great. And yeah, you're just a strong voice on LinkedIn around comms and AI and DEI and all these things. So yeah, you're doing a great job. So thank you.
Thank you. We're trying to leave the world a little better than I found it.
Right. Yes, I love that.